Here is the actual Greek as it appears in a papyrus collection named P46, some of which is housed in the Chester Beatty Papyrus Collection in Dublin, Ireland, and some in the University of Michigan Papyrus Collection. This is an image of the papyrus leaf upon which our verse sits. The page contains Galatians 4:2 through 4:17. The date range for this manuscript is roughly the late 2nd century to early 3rd century. A link to this image can be found in the description of this video. Now, let's zoom in and highlight the words in question. Now, don't panic if this looks Greek to you because it is Greek. But we have only 5 words to deal with, so this won't be very difficult and it won't be very time-consuming, so let's break it down. The first word is genomenon, which has a root word of genomai, and means to be made, to come into existence, to appear in history, to step onto the stage, etc. The one thing it doesn't mean is to be physically born, as in fathered, sired, or a woman giving birth to a human baby. There is another Greek word for that, and it is genao. We can see Paul use this very word a few verses later in this same chapter. But he who was of the bondwoman was born, genao, after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise. And he uses genao again a few verses later in Galatians 4:29. But as then he that was born, genao, after the flesh, persecuted him that was born after the Spirit, even so it is now. And just in case you're thinking that Paul used the word genao, or born, in reference to Jesus here, the actual Greek does not have the words, him that was born. This was added by the translators. The actual Greek says nothing about Jesus. It does not have the name Jesus in the verse. It doesn't have him that was born in there. It simply says, he that was born after the flesh, that means Paul, persecuted the realm of, or persecuted after, the Spirit. So Paul is consistent here in using born for only people who were actually born. So if Paul had a physical birth in mind, it seems quite strange for him to avoid genao and choose to use the word genomai, which is never used to refer to a physical birth in any New Testament verse as far as I know. One word into the Jesus myth-eating part of the verse, and we are already discovering that this verse has been mistranslated in almost every translation except for the King James Version, hard to believe, Young's literal translation, and Darby's translation. Well done, KJV. The next word, ek, means out of, from, by, away from. It gives the feeling that something or some idea or some entity caused another thing. Like the words come out of my mouth. I caused the words to exist. This will come into play as we try to come to a better understanding of what Paul was trying to say. The next word is gunaikos, and the root word is gune. This word means woman. It's where we get the prefix for gynecologist. So, a literal translation so far might be something like made of a woman, which is how the KJV translates it, or come of woman, which is how Darby translates it, or come of a woman, which is how Young translates it, or an alternative would be brought into existence by woman, or perhaps made to appear in history by woman, etc. The next 3 words are again genomai, meaning made or brought into existence, hypo, meaning under, by, of, with, in, and naman, which means law, custom, command. But in the context of Galatians, it of course means the Mosaic law. So this would literally be translated something like made under the law, or brought onto the stage under the law, or even brought into history under the law. And we can assume that under the law doesn't mean physically under 2 stone tablets or physically under a copy of the Old Testament law. Under the law means bound by the law, under the yoke of the law. Whatever is under the law is bound by the law, restricted by the law. Now, if we write the words this way, brought into history by woman, brought into history under the law, we have a perfectly reasonable translation from the actual Greek. This is much more in line with what the Greek words themselves mean. We could also say made to appear by woman, made to appear under the law. So how does this solve our problem? Didn't Mary bring Jesus into history by giving birth to him? Well, let me rewrite it this way. Brought into history because of woman. Brought into history due to woman. This might be stretching the meaning of ek, the literal meaning of ek. But as I said earlier, the sense of the verb is something causing something else, something coming out of something else. And it still makes sense if we think that Jesus was born of Mary. Mary caused Jesus to exist. But it doesn't quite work because whoever impregnated Mary actually caused Jesus to exist. Mary just had to go along with the physical processes until it happened. So here, it even makes more sense to believe that it's not Mary. And besides, it's a really awkward way of saying that Mary gave birth to Jesus. Made of woman? But if we substitute another woman's name instead of Mary, then the puzzle will fall into place. The clouds will part and the angels, well, you get the idea.